Assalamu alaikum. Hey, Wasif here. So in the previous video we talked about how to store data in arrays, how to store multiple data in one array, how to use multi-dimensional arrays like one array or two array another in another array, and how to access their values using loops or for loops. Okay, for loops and nested for loops, and a loop, another loop, to access the multi-dimensional arrays, the arrays between one array. Okay, so in this video we'll talk about more complex type of arrays. The last one we studied is called lists. Okay, this comes between these brackets, okay, square brackets. Now we'll talk about tuples. Tuples come between the parentheses, and dictionaries, these comes between the curly brackets. Okay, so first we have already talked about the lists, so let's move toward tuples. So let's call it tuple, or that is a reserved keyword, and in Python it is always a bad practice to store a variable name as a reserved keyword. Okay, so my tuple is equal to parenthesis, and so let's first give me an example of how this works. So let's first make a list. What's wrong with it? So okay, Peter, John, Bob, Harry, etc. Okay, so now let's print my list. Okay, so here it prints Peter, John, Bob, Harry. Now you can add more of the data in a list and delete them also. Okay, delete the already existing data in a list, or update the list. Okay, so here if we type my list and dot, here we can see all the available methods we can use with a list. Okay, so first we talked about append. So append takes an value and add it at the end of the list. Okay, it will add it here at the end. So let's say my list dot append Mary. Okay, and then now print my list. Okay, so as you can see, Mary is also added to the list. Okay, so this is for the lists. Okay, now there is another useful method called insert, and it, as you can see, it takes two parameters. For now, don't be worried about parameters or what they are, we'll talk about later in functions. So it takes two parameters, index and object. Now you can access the value stored in an array by calling its index. So first let's just make it an comment. If you remember, comments are never executed by the compiler. And now let's print the Peter. So we have to print Peter. How will do that? So the index is the number of, or the sequence in which the data is stored in a list or an array. This first index is starts from 0. Okay, so index of this value is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then so on, how many you have. Okay, so we can see how to access the value by its index. So my lists and the square brackets, and here you can give the index value of this Peter object. Okay, or Peter data. So 0. Now let's print it. Okay, so we get Peter because Peter's index is 0 and it is stored in my list. So that's how you can access the values by index. That was how index work. What is index? Okay, so now let's go back to our insert method. So anything you use with the dot followed by an variable or any object is refers as a method, sorry. Okay, so we'll talk about them in classes and objects. These are kinds of functions. Any function in a class is called a method, but we'll talk about them later. So insert, it takes, as you can see, let me first clear it. The VS Code gives us the hint. So what will it take? First it will take index and then the object we want to store. So suppose we want to store another name, let's call it after comma Wasif. We want to store this object Wasif. Okay, object. Now we want to store it right after the Peter. So remember, the first index is always 0, so it will take index 1. So one index will be second value. Okay, so let's store it, index 1 and object wasif. Okay, we want, and remember it use insert method. So let's run it. As you can see, wasif is added right after the Peter. Okay, so that's how the insert method or append method works. Now there is another method called clear. Okay, so it remove all items from the list. It's just clear all your lists. So that's how it's work. You can see nothing is in here. Now let's talk about you. Now there are so many methods in the arrays. If we talk all about them, it will take of course another course on it or another tutorial, because there are so much. You can learn more about them on websites like w3schools.com or tutorial points. These are just websites, I can tell you there are details about them. So let's just talk in this video we'll just talk about the tuples, dictionaries and lists. So we already talked about lists and how the indexes works. Now let's work with tuples. So tuples are the type of arrays that can store value only when they are created. Okay, so now we can give it values like Wasif Ali, John Smith, John Doe. Okay, so unlike the other type of arrays like lists, we cannot modify the value in them or later in the program. Okay, so if we type, just rename it to my tuple. So my tuple. Okay, as we can see there is nothing like append or insert or clear. Okay, because we cannot modify them. There is just two methods, count and index. So let's see what can index do. It return first index of the value. Okay, value, start and stop. You can also learn about them in the website I have mentioned. They are super easy. And count, as you can see it return number of occurrence in value. Okay, it takes one value like Wasif Ali, run it. Okay, as you can see it is not a number, so it does return anything. So you cannot modify the tuples cannot be changed later in the program. Okay, that's simple. Now let's talk about dictionaries, another that is a little complex type. So not so much but a little more than the lists and tuples. So let's say my dictionaries is equal to, these comes between the curly brackets or curly braces. Okay, whatever you call them. So unlike the tuples and lists, we don't call their value by the index, but we call their values by their keywords. Okay, let's say instead of my dictionary says the student. Okay, we want to store the data of a student in a dictionary. So let's expand it, and now we will give it a keyword. Let's call it name or smaller n. Now instead of giving equal to sign, we give those columns. Okay, they give the keywords a value, name Wasif Ali. Okay, then class, oh, sorry, class, let's say first year, whatever. Okay, then let's give it another, yeah, age, and it's his age is just like we will say 20. Okay, so now if you print the student, as you can see it returns the whole dictionaries. Now what if we want to return only the name or class or even the age? So let's first check out by giving index. As you can see the Python gives us an error because in dictionaries we don't refer the value or we don't access the value by calling the index. We call them by the keywords we have assigned to them, like name, class and age. So let's call first the name. Okay, so let's run it. It returns Wasif Ali. So that's how the arrays, multiple types of arrays in Python works. Like tuples, we can do anything with lists. We can add value to them. They are more useful when you want to access data later in them. We use tuple when you want to just not to mess up with data stored in them. So and dictionaries, we refers these data with their keywords. Okay, name, class and age are the example. Now let's access the age. Same, it's 20, and that's how just it works. Okay, just give comma after everything and use colons instead of the equal sign. Okay, that's how the tuples, lists and dictionaries work. So there was the types of arrays that can store multiple data in them. In the next video we'll talk about for loops and while loops. Okay, so till then, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, kindly press the subscribe button and give this video a huge thumbs up only if you like it. Okay.